We're live.
All right, we are live. We're live on multiple channels. So, all right, let's do this. And we're Zengig, and this is our Gen XYZ show where we talk about the differences with the generations working together. And today is all about everyone's favorite
All about
generation,
me.
Oh,
millennials. Well, it's always all about the millennials. So of course it is. So I'm Pete. I'm the Gen Xer. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
I'm
I'm
Peter.
Ashley.
I'm the millennial, Gen Y.
I'm Ashley. I'm Gen Z.
All right, you guys. So, Peter, before we get this going, are there any? We don't want to hurt your feelings.
Yeah, I've taken my mental health day. I'm ready. I'm prepared. I'm rested up. So I'm ready to go.
So let's just start right. Let's just get right to it. Unless you want to read one of your tweets, Ashley. You want me to go, or who's starting? Who's taking the first shot?
It's like this is like a roast, so I'll sit back and
Let's start with the first one because I know Peter can relate to this. So, millennials love to watch TikToks on Instagram instead of downloading TikTok, and they think they're morally superior. So, this is something someone tweeted. What do you think about that?
That's actually true. I've seen that many times. Like I get my TikToks from Instagram like an adult.
But why are you so against TikTok or downloading TikTok? What makes you not want to download
I'm probably a bad example of this, but I mean, I don't need any more social medias on my phone. I guess me and my friends, my generation, we have seen the rise of social media and then it going like too much so now it's like a purposeful decision to not get involved in any more social media. I say this as we're like on social media right now. So
as we're streaming
I do recognize the irony of that.
Places. All right.
What else?
So, all right. So, Peter, let's just get right to it. Millennials, the characteristics of the millennial generation, right? We have to start at the top with entitlement. Mm-hmm. None's bigger than that. Millennials are entitled. True or false?
I don't think we're entitled any more than any other generation is entitled. If anything, I would say, I can say this because there's no baby boomers on our show. I think baby boomers are the most entitled generation. So like the fact that we're called that is a fact that is the stereotype of baby boomers, is they're the me generation. Whereas, so we were raised by them. So I guess that's where some of that comes from is, my parents are baby boomers and my friends' parents are baby boomers. So I guess that's where we get the entitlement from. But I don't think it's necessarily a true thing. The millennials I know, they're not willing to settle. So I'll say that. I guess that's where the entitled thing comes from. Like we have high standards, and for at least in our work, and I'll say kind of all through life. Is that kind of what you have seen? I mean, I know you work with lots of millennials, so.
Yeah, I think the shift that I've seen with millennials when they started entering the workforce is I do think there's a sense of entitlement in some areas where I tie it to success happening faster and have it to be easier to come by versus having to earn things, right? So that to me would be the anti-entitlement perspective, where you feel like nothing is a given, nothing's going to be handed to you. Anything that you achieve, it's because you earned it. And I think that that's a tough one for younger generations. I mean, I would put Ashley's generation in that same boat too, but we'll get to that next week. Do you think that's a fair assessment, or do you think that's off base?
I mean, I think there's definitely a fair bit of like millennials were. I mean, the participation trophy, and that is all that does come from somewhere, and that's so.
Well, it comes quite literally from participation trophies.
And I would say that the participation trophies, everyone likes to pile onto millennials about being like that generation, but who's the one who gave them to us? Like, well, I didn't decide to be like raised, that way. I personally wasn't, but like, I mean,
I mean, that was what one of the tweets said. So it said, "Oh, you millennial kids just want trophies for everything," and then another millennial tweeted back trying to back it up by saying like who's the one giving us the trophies like at every soccer game or like everything we did just giving us like stickers and rewards.
So I think that comes from, if you look at the what I just said about our parents being a generation that was raised, in that sort of way, their kids became special. So they're an extension of them. They're raised. So maybe that did rub off on us, and we are willing, not as willing to just settle for anything, and nothing is guaranteed. I would also say that being raised, in the changing times that I've seen a lot of, economic changes in my career. And I think that in seeing that, you don't take anything for granted. So I would say that a lot of millennials, the ones I know at least, have had, as we were coming of age, our parents got laid off in, the Great Recession, the housing market, like that was, so we saw jobs as not being a given and not being necessarily something that's going to last forever. So if you're going to do that, you might as well like demand high return,
So what's interesting to me is we talked about participation trophies, right? And you use that as a reason why, as professionals, as adults, the generation is the way it is. Well, that's what happened when you were 10. And that shouldn't necessarily carry over to how you behave in your 20s and 30s or what expectation you should have. So it's great that you had a reward at 10. Things like,
yeah, but you're saying that so how you were raised doesn't have any effect on how you turned out as an adult.
I'm saying it has a huge impact. However, you have to be able to separate these
Well,
things.
I think that's why that's that joke. I mean, that's why it's such a joke. And I don't know anybody that takes it seriously, that is like, oh yes, I deserve to just be, I mean, maybe it's just my small pool of people that I know. That nobody's like, I deserve things just for existing and showing up. Like the millennials I know they're asking for
let me tell you where I'm going with this is I think that the overbearing parents, the helicopter parents, the parents that told their kids that wanted their kids to believe they could be anything and achieve anything, right? That sounds wonderful, but there's a important part of that message that I don't think was necessarily delivered with the same impact, which is you can achieve great things if you earn it, right? Not that you're going to be granted these things. So I'll give you an example where my parents never came within 100 yards, as far as I know, of interacting with any coach that I ever had in sports or teachers, where now we all know that parenting has changed a lot, where like your generation of parents were very involved, right? It wasn't the student's fault. It was the teacher's fault for the bad grade. It wasn't the student's lack of athletic ability or the player's athletic ability keeping them off the field. It was the coach's fault. Like I never heard growing up that politics was a reason why a kid didn't play, right? It just, you weren't as good as the other ones. And that was enough. But now parents have become involved in all of that. So that mindset, I think, has carried over, where you do expect success without necessarily having to earn it. I mean, I think that's a generational shift that has occurred over the last couple of decades.
I think that the digital advent of stuff has also sped that up, where there's more instant gratification. And I could say that's across multiple generations, not even just millennials, where you expect results quicker than, I mean, think about how, I don't know, 15 years ago, I'll think about 15 years ago when I was a teenager, and you would order something and it would come in a week or two. Now, if it's not like 2-day delivery, you're like, what is taking so long? So I think that combined with, maybe that portion of how we were raised, that's where that all comes from, is expecting results far faster maybe than previous generations had.
I feel like maybe even growing up in like schools, like let's just say elementary school, middle school, everyone would get a sticker for effort. And if you didn't get a sticker, you'd always expect one. You'd be like, hey, I did a good job. Why didn't I get a sticker? So I feel like that might have carried over to that kind of like behavior of being rewarded for just even doing the bare minimum. So,
well, a sticker for effort, if effort was actually put forth, is meaningful, right? I like that idea of a reward, right? Because effort is what is most needed. You forget the outcome. If the effort's there, you should reward that within young people, right? Or professionals in general. I think that's a great thing. But if everyone gets a sticker, then it is meaningless. And that is where this idea of the participation trophies really come in, where you're being rewarded regardless of whether you put forth effort. I mean, that's inherently wrong, is it not?
You need to throw in the gif of Incredibles when he says, "When everyone's special, no one is." Here.
Wait, it's funny you say GIF.
Syndrome.
It's funny you say GIF.
Point.
Yeah, I mean, what the I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I will note, by the way, that when I played, Little League and then soccer and everything, the participation trophies, you had to have played every game and you had to show up. You didn't just get them for like existing. So that was a little bit of like, you did have to have effort, and the winning team did get a bigger trophy. So
guys, I have to throw in a little roast right here because Peter mentioned GIFs and there is a tweet about that. It says millennials love using GIFs for reactions.
Yeah, I mean, why would I not? If a picture says 1,000 words, then a GIF says 10,000 words.
We'll get to the laziness stereotype in a second, but hold on before you jump ahead to that. But I'll tell you that one shift that I saw with millennials in the workforce is back to the parental involvement, where up until 15 years ago, never did it occur to me that parents would be involved in someone's professional life. But being in staffing, we know this. Parents have called us, right? Parents have called and wanted explanations for things with their parent or their kids, right? They're not children anymore.
Isn't that more of an indictment on the parents though than the kids? Because I know every time that's happened, because it's happened a couple times, it's like the kid is like cringing. Like, I say kid, they're like 20-something-year-old is like cringing. Like, what is happening here?
Yeah, I remember the first time someone walked into my office and asked a question. I'm like, why would you ask that? They wanted to see something that was inappropriate for them to see. I mean, it was like the details of the company, the books, or they're like, hey, I really want to see all the finances, and this is a private business. And I said, why would you think that? Oh, my dad said I should ask. Like, first of all, if that did happen, you should be embarrassed to say it out loud, but there's no shame whatsoever.
Tell your dad he gave you really bad advice.
But don't you think that is, so maybe we're all in agreement that parenting has really led to these changes?
I do agree with that. And I think that it's a relatively smaller portion that are actually behaving like that. I mean, most of the millennials I met have been well adjusted and they are not having like crazy parents. I have met a couple people that have crazy parents like that would do that. And I think that actually it's swinging the other way. And actually, as I see millennials themselves becoming parents, my peers and everything, they've taken that into account and they're actually like trying to like purposely go against that, which I think has probably been good, which is, a lot of millennials I know are frankly better parents than their parents were.
That makes sense. I like that. So, okay. So number 2 stereotype, millennials are lazy. True or false?
Lazy is in the eye of the beholder. I feel like in a traditional way,
as a lazy person.
Well, in a traditional way, I would say that millennials work smarter, not harder, because where you get, someone who's maybe older and they're like, well, they don't stay in the office until 5 p.m. every day, or they're not here till 8 o'clock at night doing, grinding away at the typewriter or, whatever, using their slate and chalk.
Typewriter.
I would say, I've got my phone, I've got emails. So if I can answer an email at night and if I leave and I'm, going on a run or something, someone calls me, I've got to stop and answer it. And this has happened to me where I've been like, I can solve this problem right now. Am I working or am I not working? Am I being lazy? So that's where I think that multitasking and having access to a lot more digital resources and being better with them than maybe older, that's where that stereotype comes from. I don't think it's laziness. I think it's just being better at multitasking.
But aren't these also, you're also talking about the quiet quitters who don't want to be contacted after hours, and that's not, so which is it? You can you
setting boundaries is one, I think. We've talked about this before. I think if a company is paying you to do a job and you do that job satisfactory, to satisfaction of your supervisor, I think that's fine. And if you say, hey, when I'm working, I'm working. When I'm not working, I'm not working. That's different, I think. And I think maybe that probably plays into the whole aspect of people saying that millennials are lazy because we work differently than our previous generations.
All right. So to that point, Cameron asked about what we think about millennials using technology to automate tasks. I'll assume that you mean tasks that your employer is paying you to do. What do you guys think about that?
Do it. Yeah, great. If I can get a job done that would normally take me 8 hours in 4 hours, then great. And also I would argue that if you're thinking of ways, like say if I've got a bunch of reports or something and I take the time to write a script to automate that and run it and everything, then I have done work. I put that work in on the front end to make it easier for me on the back end. So that goes into the working smarter, not harder thing.
Should you hide that from your employee, or if the task historically has taken 8 hours, we'll just use round numbers for this, and you've figured out a way to automate it and finish it in 4.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing for the other 4 hours? Are you going to raise your hand at the 4 and say, hey, I'm finished, I'm ready for more, or effectively double your output?
Well, here's where the conundrum comes, because as lots of millennials have seen, the most efficient people, you get rewarded with more work. So could you do that? Or could you then use that to maybe work in an extra area, not necessarily like point it out and just show your boss you're doing really good at your job? Should you voluntarily be as transparent? I think that's more of an ethical dilemma. You decide on a person-to-person basis. If I was able to effectively double my output and my employer was happy and they were like, you're finishing all your stuff on time, I don't really see an issue with that. And I think a lot of millennials probably don't either, because at the end of the day, and this is another thing we've talked about, the employer is going to be loyal to themselves, and you need to be loyal to yourself. Do as much as you can to make as much money as you can.
So when I hear that, and I agree with everything you said, except from my perspective, I think that being loyal to yourself
Mm-hmm.
means taking credit for figuring out how to double productivity, figuring out how to advance the organization, show that you show that initiative and get the reward that comes along with it. Not sit back and hide, right? Which was, that like, and coast for 4 hours like that, to me is such a foreign concept.
I wouldn't say coast, and I would revise my statement to add a little addendum there that depends on your company. If you work for a company, which I think we at Zengate think you should work for the company that values you. If you work for a company that values you, and I say I'm going to do this, and I know that if I talk to my boss about it, and I'm like, hey, here I did X, Y, and Z, I'm able to do this, and I'm going to get recognized for it, potentially promoted for it, for making things, being efficient, getting paid more, then yes, do that. But if you're working for a company, and that's where the whole quiet quitting comes in thing, where you work for a company that's not going to care that you did it, and they're like, just shut up and do your job type of thing. And if you finish your thing, great. All right, here's some more work for you. Like, you're not going to get recognized. I think that's where that comes in. And you shouldn't be working for a company like that to begin with, I would say.
I think he just demonstrated the whole participation trophy thing.
What, that you participated in doing your job?
No, but you were just expecting like a reward from,
if I automated my job and did it and was able to make it done in a more efficient way, I don't think it's necessarily a participation trophy. I think that is me putting in effort in innovating. And I think that's probably the mindset that a lot of millennials have, is that if we're able to make things easier on our company, as long as they reward me, then I have no problem, going and going above and beyond. And I think that's more of beyond just millennials. That's more of a workplace thing right now with employers, is the ones that reward their employees and that treat them well and that show them like, hey, you go above and beyond, you're going to get that reward. They don't have that issue. They don't have quiet quitting. I think the ones that complain about that are the ones that aren't really great employers to work for.
So that you go above and beyond, right? I mean, Napoleon Hill wrote about that 100 years ago in his book Think and Grow Rich. It's a book I reference often, as you guys know. It's the steps to success, the magic ladder. It's called he called it a few different things over the years, but one of those is effectively go above and beyond as a means of achieving success. And it's not tied to any specific job or position you're in at that time. It's just almost a mindset and an approach. But I think that's not characteristic of the generation. I think that sort of a perspective of quiet quitting, which is I'm going to do what I'm asked to do and no more, is prevalent. Do you agree?
Well, you look at that aspect, and I could say that are they doing what's asked of them, or are they doing what the contract is? I pay you to do X, I do X. Like I shouldn't just a person choosing to go above and beyond just because that's their own, personal motivations, I would say.
But should that not be the default way to operate?
I don't think it any way should be a default. If you choose, you're like, hey, I'm more interested in just making money and going home and, making enough and having a good, work-life balance. I think then you take that into account. So I don't think you should go above and beyond always if you don't, that's not important to you.
Napoleon Hill is rolling over in his grave hearing that right now.
Napoleon Hill, it's a good book and I have read it, but also it was written over 100 years ago. So
yeah, I mean, and so that's a great point, right? Ashley, where do you land with that? So do those ideals that many would consider to be tried and true, that are just foundations of success, are no longer, if you go down, and I've started actually writing a modern day version of this because I think it's so, it tells such it tells the story so well of what, again, is considered to be traditional values, tried and true beliefs on how success happens in today's world. A lot of those things are shunned, where I would say the opposite. I would say, by all means, the default should be go above and beyond. If you tell me I'm supposed to produce 10, I'm going to produce 11, right? Why? Because that's how I'm going to stand out. That's how I'm going to.
But what if you aren't standing out? What if you produce 11 and they say, great, now make 12? And
well, I mean, I also agree that you have to be in a situation that is right for you as an individual. But if you're not in that situation, if by producing 12 there is no reward, then consider alternatives, right? We certainly agree on that. But it's about the mindset going in, where I think we differ. Ashley, where do you land with that?
I mean, I think it's changed a lot, the whole mindset thing, and I feel like millennials and Gen Z will kindly be on the same page with this.
Mm-hmm.
I guess our mindset on success is different than, I guess, what the mindset of success would be for like Gen X. You guys are, work harder and things will come to you if you just keep working hard, put in the effort, go out there, get the experience. And then I feel like nowadays it's like people feel like you can be successful even without, I guess, putting in as much effort. Again, they expect it to kind of just come straight to their lap.
Is there evidence that works? Because what we see, again, so we'll talk about another, another characteristic, right? Fair or not, is millennials are saddled with debt and they complain about debt a lot. How do you get out of debt if you don't work your way out of debt? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that.
I don't think I think that our argument for that is that the debt is growing at a higher rate and that they aren't able to make as much money at a fast enough rate to get out of it. And I think that is that's a legitimate thing. The work environment and everything has changed so much. And we've talked about how, 50 years ago, the environment was a lot more favorable than it is today. And wages are, we've talked about this on ZenGig too, is, finding companies that pay you, what you're worth. Wages are not necessarily guaranteed to match your level of effort. And I think that's where all of this kind of rolls back in is, and I don't by any means speak for obviously my whole generation. This is just my own viewpoint and everything. So I'll caveat that. I think that I've seen in a lot of cases with my peers is places that the inflation goes up and the places pay the same. And so how are you supposed to reconcile that? So why should a millennial or anyone for that matter be, go above and beyond when it's not going to pay off? It's not going to do anything extra for them. Having that mindset is great. And I know lots of millennials who are very driven and, almost to the overachiever part. But I think that goes back to maybe that's the participation trophy is I'm not going to do something without a reward.
I mean, even the whole debt thing. So my sister is a millennial, and she got a really good job. She's a NICU nurse. They make pretty good money, but after all her paychecks, she barely sees any of it because it goes to all of her debt, and it feels like her debt isn't getting any better. It's still constantly high, and she's just constantly working, and it's not getting better. So
millennials are the most educated generation. That's a fact. That it is. That's you can argue it or give me a look, but we are the most hot secondary education, so college and above, beyond any generation previous. We attended college in greater numbers than any prior generation.
A lot of private schools, a lot of private college expenses.
Yeah, so
and who said that was a good idea?
Probably their parents, I would assume. That was us being pushed into going to college, but that's still that's besides the point. So I would say that coming out of, we came out of school. I mean, I graduated in 2011, so people are graduating right around the time the economy wasn't great when the middle of millennials were hitting the job market. So we got a little bit of a rocky start, and I think I read actually a study in preparation for this just about how job hopping and how loyal people are to companies, and it showed that people that started out with a really good company that were valued and everything showed a lot more longevity and were willing to give jobs a chance than people that basically were strung along at unpaid internship, temp job, stuff like that. It kind of carried on later in their career where they were not willing to stay at a job for more than a couple of years, or not even a couple of years, maybe a year at a time, which I know that's another stereotype of millennials is us jumping around from different job to job. So
it is excessive job hopping, right?
Yeah.
It is, and that's real. That's a thing.
Yeah, it is.
Does it do more harm than good?
I think it kind of goes back to when we had a show where we just talked about job hopping. I know. So it goes back to if the company is right for you and if you're going to look out for yourself. So I think that's a trend that you're seeing with a lot of millennials and definitely with Gen Z as well. Is at the end of the day, I'm not going to put my own, desires and needs aside for the good of the company. Whereas that might've been something that happened with, my parents' generations where they would, someone would work somewhere for 30 years and retire with a gold watch. I don't think that's happening anymore.
Yeah, I mean, we're having fun with this. We're talking about the stereotypes, exaggerating things, but there is a lot of truth to when we talk about job hopping. I worry that people make short-term decisions because of a situation that they're in, and one of the things to point to is what happened over the last year and a half. About a year and a half ago, as hiring really ramped up, and there was big layoffs, of course, with COVID. The pendulum swung the other way. Companies were hiring excessively, and we saw huge turnover in the market because companies kept raising the bar. The income levels and starting salaries kept going up, and that was very attractive to a lot of people, and they jumped at those opportunities. But you could kind of see the pendulum was going to come back. That it was what I consider to be a lot of unnatural hiring that the market couldn't sustain. And so companies met the demand. Amazon and and Facebook, who just announced, by the way, another 8,000 layoffs today, I believe.
Yeah, I saw it.
So you kind of, I mean, from my perspective, I saw that this was going to happen. And
well, are you doing armchair quarterback? Like, as a person in the thick of it, if you, and as we work in, obviously we're familiar with the job market, so yeah, we can see it happening. But if you, I mean, most people, they're not looking for jobs constantly. They're not updating their resume. You know, they might be on a couple interviews just with spans of years between them. So if a company comes to you and says, "I'll pay you 10,000 more," and you go to them, and then 6 months later, another company says, "I'll pay you 10,000 more than that." Like, are you?
So to bring that home is that what I worry about is generationally in just anyone you need to look at the longer term when making that decision, right? So could it be a few more bucks today? Sure. But balance that against what it means to your resume long term. We know this being in staffing that managers and HR departments will, right or wrong, and yeah, this is not my opinion, this is just fact, that they will look at a resume, and if they see someone's a job hopper, that's a red flag.
Mhm.
It just is. And so that's what I worry about is, and I see, I mean, and maybe it's because I'm old school with this, but when I see people giving career advice or being critical on LinkedIn, there's an example, and I won't go into too much detail because I don't want to call this person out too much, but very extreme advice that was offered on LinkedIn the other day, and it had thousands of shares and likes. And it was one of those posts. And I looked at this person's job history, and they had 8 jobs in the last 8 years. And my thought, tell me if you agree with this mentality or not, was how you shouldn't be giving advice, right? If you can't stick something out somewhere,
Unless the advice is interviewing and getting a job.
no,
they're pros at starting new jobs.
Especially 8. That's crazy.
Well, it's not that uncommon either. And I think that unwillingness to stick through hard times, to figure out how to be successful in the situation that you're in is I think that's a necessary thing for long-term success.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, I'll echo what I said previously when we talked about this: is you do it, job hop all you want, but just accept that might be a red flag on a resume down the road. If you can justify it to yourself and say, I can't pass up the money, and I can explain it down the road, and then that's fine. But go into it with your eyes open
and look longer term.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe you say, okay, I'm willing to stick this job out for 2 years, and so that at least I have 2 years at a job, and then I can move on to that. Which, by the way, that's generally when I see like people that stay at a job for at least 2 years before moving. Like, I don't really consider that to be job hoppy. But when I see 6 months here, 9 months here, under a year at each one, that's kind of an issue. And I'll agree with that. I don't know if that's necessarily a Gen Z thing or a millennial thing, or if it's going to continue on into future generations as well.
No, I think it's I don't think it's necessarily, but I do think that there's been I think the younger professionals, and I don't know where this crosses the line of Generation Y or Z, have a belief that job hopping is not a negative thing to do. And we all agree that it is, I believe, right? I mean, anyone in staffing and recruiting knows that is
anyone who hires is going to do it, because if you're a manager, even if you're not in staffing, you could be a marketing manager somewhere. You're going to hire someone, you see them in a bunch of jobs, you're like, okay, well, what's going to make me different? Like, am I going to spend all this time training this person, and then they're going to turn around and leave as soon as they're like competent in their job? Because we all know, like, someone starts a job, they're not really going to be a good contributor, like solid, at least until maybe 90 days into their job.
I guess you guys will have to get my opinion next week.
Yeah. We'll see what Gen Z feels like on the subject.
You'll keep it a secret? Okay, fair enough.
Keep it a secret for now.
All right, Ashley, let's see the tweets. Come on, where are we?
What else do we got?
You've been too kind.
I feel I'm shocked.
It's because we commiserate. We're in this together, all the younger generations.
I don't know about that. There's always feud between millennials and Gen Z. But surprisingly, I don't know why, I couldn't find that many like tweets roasting your generation. And
That's because we're awesome.
if I did find it, you guys would back it up instantly. So I feel like people were being too kind because honestly, the biggest like stuff I've seen on tweets so far is millennials love to say I deserve a little treat while buying basic necessities. So I guess that's
All that is that just said that we're underpaid.
And then another one says, "Why do millennials love saying I was today years old?"
That I don't know. I guess that was just a funny internet meme. I mean, we were the ones who start like memes on the internet, and that's why we like GIFs or GIFs so much. Is we came up with those and started, the whole meme generation.
No, but I'm surprised because everyone claims that they hate millennials, but yet they're being kind on Twitter. But I did find another article that said like top 10 reasons why millennials are most hated. So I don't know if you want me to
All
read
right,
that.
let's close with that because we're not getting any comments right now. So let's go, and then we'll.
That's because all the people watching are millennials themselves, and they're like, "So what are they gonna just? They're coming to my rescue here."
Here, let me pull it up really quick. Oh my God, it was so funny. Oh, here we go. You ready? This is from Watch Mojo. So let's see what they have to say. They want instant gratification. We got that. They're reliant on technology. Their priorities their priorities aren't in order. They're dependent on their parents. What do you think of that?
I know people who they moved back home after college because it was cheaper. So that's
You don't go to your parents for any help with anything?
When you need help with anything, I mean, I go like I need to know how to fix something. I can ask my dad.
I don't know. My mom will still make doctor's appointments for my millennial sister sometimes. So.
Well, that.
Me.
That's a family issue.
No, but parents have caused that, right? I mean, back to what we talked about at the beginning, that's definitely something that I know I'm guilty with my kids as being more involved than my parents ever would have been, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing.
Yeah. That's probably the common denominator we're seeing is more involved. That's a good way to put it. You see, back with the older generations, you've got their kind of go off to work, and you didn't have cell phones, and you wouldn't see, your parents until they got home from work, and that was that. That's the whole latchkey thing we talked about last week.
Yeah, and it does carry on. That does establish a lot of habits and traits, but we all have to get over them once we're in the workforce, right? I mean, there's no one there you can't bring your parents to work.
It's definitely a weird kind of coming of age thing with millennials, like kind of realizing like now, especially as they become parents, you're like, I still feel like a kid, and yet I'm like an adult, and I, have kids or am married or have a mortgage or what have you. And I don't know if that's necessarily uniquely to our generation, or if that's just a thing that everybody experiences of like not feeling like you're ready. But maybe it's just delayed with millennials.
Maybe. Are you ready for the last one?
Yeah, give it to me.
Okay, they're offended by everything. Are you offended by that comment?
I'm not offended by it. No, and I think that's probably the loud minority of people who are offended by everything. If I'm offended by something, I'm not gonna I guess go out there and say it. I'm just gonna ignore it.
And it says that you guys are offended by everything because you have become too sensitive.
Oh, we're sensitive. Okay. You know what millennials especially love is being told how they feel. And that's a common thing that I feel like I see a lot of.
Well, and we didn't talk about this is the last thing I had too. It's kind of along those lines is the need to be praised that in the workplace, which is, I think we know that that's a thing. Mm-hmm. But where does that come from? Where does sensitivity come from? Where does everything is offensive? That is clearly a thing.
Well, I think the praise thing is I don't know where that comes from. I guess that's from people probably, have always wanted some sort of validation. It's just people maybe look to work and externally for it, as opposed to like, different areas. Whereas maybe prior generations got it outside of work, or,
Well, you see where it comes from. I mean, I guess, like birthdays. When you're a 1-year-old birthday party, you see these things that are just they're like weddings were 30 years ago. They're so elaborate, or sweet 16 parties, and that's all been glamorized. Wasn't there a show on MTV? I mean, I was working and not seeing it, but I know of it, where there was
My Super Sweet 16 was the name of the show. Shout out to MTV.
So, and I feel like Gen Z, I feel like I never see any Sweet 16 stuff like that anymore. So
because no one can afford it because of inflation now.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think maybe that is part of it, where it has not been from lack of desire to continue it as much as it is lack of, practicality at this point. I mean, and because Peter, I 100% agree with what you were saying about in inflation. The math doesn't lie, right? And we're not going to go down a political path on this show right now, but that is unfortunate, very, very unfortunate. And I don't know that anyone's going to solve that in the foreseeable future. But this idea of a 16-year-old, getting showered with gifts and elaborate parties, I mean, that just sets you up for thinking you've achieved and accomplished something you quite literally have not. I mean, all you've done is survived up until that point on someone else's dime. And that does create a mindset of expectations and entitlement. How could it not?
I think that's social media and the exposure to the, 24-hour TV channels that are just having those kind of things, because most people are not having those, elaborate, but you see it and you're like, well, why is my life not like that? And make it go down a whole, psychological avenue. Whereas I generally believe that too much social media is bad, and that, compare, especially for younger people who are, growing up, and it damages your perception of reality. And maybe that's where a lot of it comes from. And so we're not going to see the whole big picture of it, I think, for years down the road, as people, it's ingrained in them,
Well, look at, take something like a, iPhone, where I say is that a luxury? I think it is, but yet people take
iPhone
it.
Specifically, I would say that's a luxury. I mean, a phone and in this day and age, having a smartphone is probably more of a necessity, and at least in a professional aspect. You need to be able to although there is the swing for Gen Z to bring back the flip phone, and people that's like the go now, as people trying to disconnect.
Life was better with flip phones.
You talk to my wife, she's talking about how she's like, I need to be on my phone less. I'm going to get a flip phone. She keeps talking about how she's going to get a flip phone. Like, okay, go get a Razor. You can get the nostalgia.
Yeah,
Ashley, would you get a flip phone?
It's actually becoming a big thing now.
That's what I'm saying. The Gen Zs they're all about the flip phones. Maybe it's because it's retro, but also because being mindful of
multiple reasons. So I've seen TikToks about it. So Gen Zers will get it because they think the camera roll on it looks cool with that vintage kind of look to it. Or even when they're going to concerts or out to bars or big busy places, a lot of the times iPhones are stolen, and that's so much money. So people bring flip phones with them and leave their iPhones back home. They just call up their ride, and that's all they really need it for.
I'm gonna get out my old Nokia brick, and then if somebody, it serves as both phone and self-defense. I can throw it at somebody and give them a concussion. So that's what I'm gonna switch to.
That was the most millennial thing I think I've ever heard.
You can play Snake on it, so it has games.
No, but I don't see that happening, unfortunately, where we get away from phones. But I think that would solve a lot of problems, right?
Being able to disconnect is useful, and I think that's we kind of hit a critical mass, I think, with social media and with all that. And now people are recognizing it. So that's why it'll be interesting to see how things kind of change over, say, the next decade, as that's become more well-known. I think nothing I've said is revolutionary, that people don't know that. So.
All right. Well, unfortunately, whatever crowd we have is not chiming in against you, Peter. You've somehow skated through this pretty nicely today.
Crowd favorite.
I tried to make it a little hard on you, but I felt like I was going.
We're just we're the underdogs, and we're just so sympathetic. We're Rocky and you're Apollo Creed.
Well, you were saying last week that I was, whatever you called my generation wasn't kind, and so I felt like all I was doing was playing into that stereotype by being critical of you. So I didn't want to do that either.
We are excellent debaters. I'll say that. How about the millennials? How about that?
We actually did have a comment come in from a LinkedIn user that said social media used to be an escape from real life. Now real life is an escape from social media.
Yeah, it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. So
yeah, but I love that line. I mean, it's so true, and it is. There's a sense of freedom that you have when you can't access your phone if you forget it somewhere. That's great. Was that Haley? Okay, thank you, Haley. It doesn't show that on my screen. So if that was Haley, I agree with you 100%. So we're gonna have to bring you on. Maybe she's another Gen Zer. We can have her on next week. Ashley, help you out.
Yes, guest host.
All right, one more dish. Millennials love air fryers because they are easy bake ovens for adults.
Well, I never had an easy bake oven. My sister did, but I do love air fryers, and they do make French fries taste better than making them in the microwave or oven.
Who doesn't love an air fryer?
I don't know. I feel like they make my fries mushy. I don't know if I'm using it right. But...
You are not doing it right. If you're ending up with...
We'll leave that for another time.
Turn it on,
All right, so there's some Gen Z stuff in there. Okay, well, if there's anyone else, any comments, we'll stay on. But otherwise, I think we've beaten this up enough.
Yeah. Right. Next week will be Gen Z, so that'll be a fun one.
Oh God, I'm ready. Bye, guys.
All right, thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.